Okay. We are recording. It's 2:59. Welcome everyone. I'm going to be letting people in from the waiting room as we speak. I have to start. I apologize for having to use the waiting room. I've been asked to use it by the county for security. I'm going to start with reading the Yolo County Library Land Acknowledgement. We should take a moment to acknowledge the land on which we are gathered for this meeting. For thousands of years, this land has been the home of the Patwin people, including the Yoche-Dehe-Winton Nation today. The Patwin people have remained committed to the stewardship of this land over many centuries. It has been cherished and protected as elders have instructed the young through generations. We are honored and grateful to be gathered here today on their traditional land. And I'm going to hand it off to Mike to get started, to Joy to get started. Okay. Yep. And I'll put my email into the chat box if anyone wants to get added to our email list. Okay, it's all you.
Okay, so welcome everybody. The topic for the day is a panel discussion of springtime activities in the garden. And we are doing this as kind of a shoot off of the Master Gardener Help Desk. So I want to share my screen so that everybody can see the Master Gardener website and see what we've been doing there. Let's see. All right. I'm hoping you can all see that. This is the Yolo County Master Gardener's website, and several of us are going to be using parts of this website today. And you can see the second line from the bottom here says get help and advice. And also there's this big highlighted segment that says gardening questions, ask us. So I'm going to click on that today and share with you that we are starting to do seasonally appropriate, frequently asked questions. And today, my fellow Master Gardener presenters are going to be addressing some of the questions as specialists in their particular area. They're going to be sharing with you these questions and the answers that we have just recently posted. And many thanks to those of you who answered the questions, and also to David Studer, who helped get this stuff posted. And before I stop sharing, I want to suggest that if you have questions for any of the speakers, please put them in the chat segment, and we'll try to answer all the questions after, all the audience questions after the panelists have done their part. So the first step is Mike. Mike Cluck is going to be talking about developing raised beds in the garden.
All right,
Mike.
Hang on a little bit here. Well, I had this problem once before. Hang on. Well, I'm just going to go with this. I mean, you can see it, and this problem cropped up once before, and I can't remember the fix. So we'll just go ahead. All right. So, oh, and it should have been there. Okay. So this isn't, usually when asked a raised bed question, my first response is, do you really need them? But I'll just put that out there really quickly because some of the benefits of raised beds can be just by establishing beds and establishing the pathways. That's the big thing. And you can use our soil, which can be improved a lot and can be a good basis for really, really good garden soil. Why am I having trouble? There we go. So anyhow, that's just one thing to think about. Do you really need a raised bed? But raised beds can be very advantageous. They can define your area even better. They're generally attractive. The soil's going to warm up a little faster. So there are certainly reasons to do that. The question asked whether or not, or sort of said you may have a bed that's 36 inches deep. And so the first thing about that is it may not be necessary to have a bed 36 inches deep unless you want your garden beds to be, high so you don't have to bend over, that kind of thing. But otherwise, 18 to 24 inches is certainly deep enough for most vegetables. And you can even do shallower beds if you set it up so your roots will go down into the native soil. So we really don't need beds that are 36 inches deep. If you did want to, let's see, there we go. If you do want to make beds that are that high, one of the ways to do it and save materials and not have to buy as much soil is to just basically put them on legs. And this is just one commercial example, but there's plenty of information out there on the web about how you can do this and basically put a bottom in it. And that may be a better choice than building your bed so that it's actually 36 inches high. If you think about the amount of soil that will take, even for a small bed, 2 by 4, 36 inches high, that'd be 24 cubic feet of soil. That's almost a yard, 27 cubic feet. So that's quite a lot of soil to be using and purchasing. So this is maybe a better solution, or as I said, if you don't need it that high, then lower beds certainly work just fine. The soil itself, there's really no accepted definition of topsoil. So you really don't know what you're going to get. There are no regulations that are going to say it has to be anything. So we really recommend if you're going to buy soil and if you're putting them in a raised bed, it really is, you're probably going to have to go get bulk soil. It's just too expensive to buy it in bags. So you'd want to have bulk soil probably delivered by one of the vendors in the area, but you really should go down and look at it and make sure it's what you want to put in your raised bed. I mean, does it have a lot of sticks or stones in it? Does it seem to break up easily? And maybe most importantly, does it smell, like good organic soil? Which means it would have a high amount of compost in it. And some of the blends, there are blends available that are 50-50 compost and topsoil. Those are quite popular for raised beds. And the only aspect of that is that compost is going to decompose, and so you'd have to add more compost as the years go on, but that's really a small problem. So one of the blends is certainly a good idea. And in any event, you're going to want to add compost either to your native soil, or if you buy bulk soil that doesn't seem to have enough compost in it, it's never a bad idea to add compost. So definitely something to think about. And raised beds can be a really nice advantage to the extent, even if you have a raised bed, you can use your native soil. Maybe you've taken it out of pathways. Don't throw it out. It's a good start and it's free. And again, if you add compost even to our relatively heavy clay soils, you can make a really good garden bed. Okay.
Okay, thanks, Mike.
Yeah.
And the next question, Treva, if you have the questions with you, could you read them? Next up is Treva Valentine, who's going to answer a couple of frequently asked questions.
Okay, hi, everybody. I'm Treva. I am trying to share, and then I will read my questions. Okay, where is my?
Are you looking for the Master Gardener website?
No, I'm not. I'm looking for my little baby. There we go. My little baby PowerPoint. Do you see that? I hope.
Yep.
Okay, good. So my question, I had two questions actually. And my first question was, I've heard that you shouldn't put plants from the same family, such as cucumbers and squash or tomatoes and eggplants, in the same spot year after year. Is there any evidence for that? And if so, is it because of nutrient loss, plant diseases, pests, or something else? And the easy answer is yes to all of that. So what crop rotation means is that you're not planting plants of the same family of vegetables in the same spot like you did last year. You rotate the families. And the wisdom is that you do that for 3 years. So you would not put a plant from the same family in the same spot more often than every 3 years. Now, sometimes in little tiny gardens, that's not possible. And so if you could at least do it 1 year, I think you would be, in good shape. Let's see here. So what are plant families? Plant families, there's about 10 different plant families. I don't think it's critical that you memorize all those. You can always look them up. But I do think it's really smart for us to remember there's 2 main ones for summertime. Just keep that in your mind. There's 2 main plant families for summertime. The nightshades, which this picture is of the nightshades, although I don't think there's any potatoes in here, and potatoes are part of it. So you've got potatoes, you've got tomatillos, you've got eggplant, you've got peppers, and you've got tomatoes. So that is all one plant family. So you would want all of those things need to be in a different place. The other summertime plant family to think about is the cucurbits. It's pronounced a lot of different ways. That would be like melons, cucumbers, and the squashes, all the squashes, like the winter and the summer squashes. For wintertime gardens, the 2 main ones I think that you should remember are the brassicas, which are like the broccolis, the cauliflowers, pretty much all of the greens that you grow in the wintertime, like kales and chards and stuff like that. And then the other family that I like to just really remember would be like the ones that have the alums, the onions, it's got garlic, onion, leek, shallot, chives in it. And so those are another family to think about. But like I said, there's like 10 different families that you should kind of pay attention to. So why is this important? So this is important because different families can be susceptible to the same diseases. So this is a zucchini virus. And as you can see, there's a cucumber here, there's a zucchini here, if you can believe it. That one at the very bottom, I think, is a zucchini. There's melons and there's squashes here. And all of these have been affected by a zucchini virus. So, so certainly all members of the family can have some of the same diseases. They often succumb to many of the same pests. They often draw the same nutrients out of the soil. And they also can affect the texture, that your soil texture. So like root crops can improve soil texture just by the nature of their huge roots. I mean, all of these guys are root vegetables. Well, there's some potatoes in there, but those also, as you know, grow in underground. And so they do help break up soil. So that would be great to have. And then, maybe follow it the following year with something that is a more shallow rooted vegetable. So the last part of this question also asks, is there any evidence? And oh my gosh, there is so much evidence. There's like 3,200 scientific published papers on why this is important. So this is important. And this is mainly, I've just been talking all about vegetables, but it goes with all annual things. I routinely put zinnias in one particular area of my garden. And now I have a zinnia disease and I cannot grow zinnias there. I mean, they look beautiful at the beginning of the season. And by, when they should be just gorgeous, they're all dying. So it goes for other types of annual plants. Obviously you can't rotate perennials. We're talking about annuals here. So that was one of my questions. The next question that we got was about companion planting. And is there any scientific evidence that demonstrates that this is beneficial? Let's see here. So the common term for it now is more plant partners as opposed to companion plants. And for years, most gardeners know that there's been all kinds of anecdotal and folklore type information about planting plants together. They talk to each other, they love each other and all that, but there's not really been any scientific evidence that supports a lot of those thoughts and beliefs. But now we do have a lot of scientific evidence that different plants planted together do influence each other in a number of ways. So they certainly can affect each other, as we know, by improving pollination. I mean, that's the number one that we all think about is, pulling pollinators into our vegetable gardens to get our vegetables pollinated easier. So that's one benefit. I just mentioned about root crops and them breaking up soil. So that's another thing that can be done. You can put root crops in shallow rooted things nearby, and that helps improve the soil fertility for each other and also helps bring in nutrients and mainly water, to everybody in that area. There's also evidence that shows that pest pressure, weed pressure, and disease pressures can be decreased by planting certain plants nearer each other. And we're talking about different species of plants together, like you can see in here. So how do plants do this? How do they, affect each other? They truly, let's see, I think I got you. So this is a tobacco hornworm that wasp larvae are actually coming out of this worm. Obviously, this worm is not long for this world because of this. And so we do know that there are some plants that actually are able to message and bring different predatory insects towards themselves. And they do this through plant green leaf volatiles. They actually exude chemicals into the air that can actually signal different predatory insects to come there so that that insect has something to eat. So, and that allows that plant to be benefited by that. And I thought that was pretty cool. There's tons of experience, research on that. There's also, evidence that we all know about, the legumes that are nitrogen fixing, and that helps with soils. So we know all about that. We know that different plants can shade other plants, and they can do that for a benefit. We would do that as a benefit. It also can be harmful if you don't do it properly. So sometimes, if you say an example, if you were going to plant, say, beans and corn together, because we know that corn can act as a structure for the beans to grow up. We know that the beans do the nitrogen fixing, and we know that corn is a very heavy feeder. But you certainly can't plant them at the same time, because the beans are going to get huge before the corn gets big and totally smother out the corn before it ever, really gets going. So there are some things that you need to think about when you're doing the plant partnerships, not just who's going to benefit who, but when are you going to plant who together. So we also know that there are, and I'm sure that you've heard this from Mike and some of the other speakers in some of the other Thursday classes, that there are hyphae on roots of different plants that grow out into the soil well beyond their own root structure. And those can benefit other plants that aren't able to do it the same way. So there are a number of in the soil things that have been proven that certain plants are doing that not only benefit them, but inadvertently benefit their neighbors. Now, there's other things that plants can put in the soil that prevents competition for them. So not all of these are positive things. Some of them are negative things, where we know that a lot of the mustards are very detrimental to growing other things in that area. And sometimes that works for us if one of the things that we're trying to get rid of would be something negative like a nematode or something. There is some research that shows that some of the mustard family has some benefit in that. We also probably all know about black walnuts and them inhibiting growth around them, but there's a lot of other plants that do that as well, and they just do that through chemicals that they put out into the soil. So, I mean, this is a whole area that is exploding with information, and I would just encourage you to take one thing from this for sure, and that is monocultures don't work. So try to make sure that your garden has at least some other species mixed in with it. And it's also prettier too. So we'll take questions at the end. Thanks.
Thank you, Treva. Barb, are you ready to share your screen and
Yes. Hi, I'm Barbara, and I am going to get my screen up there and go to my questions. Let's see. Okay, let me move this little bar. There we go. Okay, I'm going back to the screen that Joyce started with, and I wanted to show you how I get there. So I just go with Google, and the first thing I type in is Yolo County Master Gardeners. You click on that, and you find yourself in Google. You click on Yolo County Master Gardeners, and here's the page that we started with. And so the question that I answered first was this one. When can I start planting seeds or plant for my summer vegetable garden? And what are some good varieties for our climate? So great question to highlight. I think one of the most useful publications we have. When I moved here in 1980, this publication was the first one we got from the Master Gardeners, and it's only improved since then. This is a keeper. This is the vegetable planting guide. It was put together by by Robert Norris from the Department of Science, Plant Sciences. And he's got it broken down into summer, fall vegetables for the Sacramento area and winter, spring vegetables for the Sacramento area. And here is the key up at the top. He tells you for each vegetable, the preferred time to plant the seeds in a greenhouse or indoors or whatever, the preferred time to transplant. This is when you go down to the hardware store and buy your transplants or go to a plant sale. And then the preferred time to direct seed, put the seed right in the soil in your garden. And here is the when you're seeding and when you're transplanting. So if you go down here, and I'm going to skip down to lettuce because you're going to see 3 lettuces. Okay, so what he's suggesting is that you have 3 plantings of something. If you want to have an extended harvest season, what you can do is plant 3 different plantings, or you probably do 4, but here is what he's got. If you put your seeds in end of July, August, you're going to start harvesting. And you can see how it gets darker when you're in your peak harvest, when it's the dark, and then it kind of fades away. And so again, you've got seeding, harvest at its peak, fading away, and then seeding, and you can extend harvest kind of out into January, February. So he does that with several of the ones that he recommends, multiple plantings for example, corn is a big one. And so this has been like one of the most useful things I think we've got. And then I am going to back up if I can back up. Oh, there, I backed up. The second part of the question was, what are some tried and true tested varieties for the area? And so for that one, I'm going right under the vegetable planting guide to our list of free garden publications. Click on that. We go down to vegetables, and what we've got is a publication called Tried and True Vegetable Varieties for Yolo County. Now, this was put together by master gardeners, and I opened it to tomatoes because everyone wants to know about tomatoes. But these are kind of the general basic varieties, and it goes, there's just tons of different potatoes, radishes, peppers. I mean, I started it towards the end of this publication, but there's tons of vegetables in there with recommended varieties for this area. And then a third recommendation that I suggested was that, again, going to the, here we go, Yolo County, Yolo Gardener newsletter. And this is you'll see we have the most current issue here is winter 2021. But if you scan through these articles that by master gardeners, you will see different articles talking about things like disease-resistant varieties, or if you want some of the latest information, I thought I saw one in here on varieties for, well, there's several articles in here where they talk about varieties for different crops. And again, these are ones that the master gardeners recommend. And so if you want this to come into your mailbox quarterly, I think, just put your email address in and hit subscribe. So that is the answer for that question. And my next question, I'm going back to Google. My next question had to do with insects on vegetables and on roses. So again, I'm going to Google and I'm going to type in UCIPM. And that takes me to this listing for the homepage for the University of California statewide IPM program, Integrated Pest Management. And if we go down to the one that says Home Garden Turf, you get to a treasure trove. So on this page, you are going to see well, not every, but the big pest questions in our region. They start out with ones that get into your house, ones that get into your plants, and then some of the common pests. So what we're interested in is the ones that get into roses, which is in this category, and the ones that get into vegetables. So let's go into vegetables. And here we have a list of vegetables and melons. I'm just going to click on tomatoes because that's a pretty popular vegetable here. And what you'll see is a general description of tomatoes and the cultural chips. Over here on the right-hand side, you're going to see the different insect and mite pests. You're going to see the diseases of tomatoes, environmental disorders, and vertebrate pests and weeds. So this specific question had to do with aphids and whiteflies. So I'm just going to pick one. You can pick one. Aphids are up here, whiteflies are down here. And you go into can look kind of daunting, actually. There's a lot of information here on identification, life cycle, damage. But if we go down to management, we sort of get into specifically what we're interested in. And you'll see under management, you have biological controls, removal, reflective mulches, traps, and insecticidal sprays. And so I think Treva briefly mentioned biological controls, but one thing I would like to talk about when we talk about insect and mite management, we always want to keep in mind that these pests are also the food source for the beneficials. So you never want to think in terms of wiping them out, because if you do, there will be nothing drawing in the beneficials into your yard. And so you always want to have the goal is to lower the population and to prevent damage to your plants that they can't recover from. And so with whiteflies, they talk about removal. Whiteflies, the immature stages are on the underside of leaves, so you're not going to normally see them unless you flip the leaf over. But if you see damaged leaves, especially lower on the plant, you can just pick them off and get them out of your garden. Reflective mulches, they have found that these reflective mulches tend to, early in the season when you plant, and I'm going to show you a picture of that. When you plant, if you've got a reflective mulch on your soil surface, it will repel some of these flying insects that come in early in the season. And another thing that will protect the plant are row row covers. I find that hard to say. ROW covers. And you can cover a whole row of plants, or if you have just like tomato plants, isolated plants here and there, you can cover those as well individually. Traps, I tend to like this one a lot. These are yellow sticky traps. And one thing about the color yellow, it is an incredible magnet for little tiny flying insects, aphids, whiteflies, thrips. They see that, they're going to go there. This is called a yellow sticky trap. On both sides of this trap, it's totally sticky. They get stuck and they're not going anywhere else. So, and another thing you can do is hose your plants off. That's a great one for aphids. Just hose the surface of the aphids tend to like the young growing tips. So if you specially hose those parts off. I want to jump over to roses because there's a little idiosyncrasy with the roses here that somehow they've managed to bury the best information. So I have clicked on trees, shrubs, woody ornamentals. Okay, you're going to see a long list of plants that are covered here, but I am going down this list to get to rose. And here we have a similar screen menu for roses. A lot of times in these notes, they've got write-ups for individual pests that are very generic. And some of the pests are pretty specific, and you know, aphids that get on roses are pretty specific, and so on and so on. So interestingly enough, under invertebrate overview is a nice publication buried that lists specific aphid pests of roses and specific ways to deal with them on roses. So you have a section on aphids, and here they talk about predators and releasing, if you want to release ladybugs. There's a link on the best way to go about doing that. Spider mites that are specific to roses, thrips, western flower thrips, and fuller rose beetle, and so forth and so on. So natural enemies you can hope for on your roses. So that's, I just wanted to point that out because I find that if you go into aphids per se, you're going to get a generic aphid write-up and it may or may not be relevant to roses. Mm-hmm. So that was pretty much all I was going to say. And I am going to take us back to.
There we go. So I was looking in the chat box and I don't see any questions. So if you have any questions, just raise a hand or type them into the chat box if you have any specific questions. And if you do have questions, be sure to unmute. Are there questions out there that we can answer about spring chores in the garden or anything else you might want to know? We'll do our best.
Joy, while we're waiting for that, before we started, a couple of us were chatting about last night's weather. And I think that brings up a good point to remember,
Yeah,
you know, on frost damage in our gardens. Just don't be too tidy too quickly, because lots of times, one, we're going to get another frost tonight, but you don't always know really what is going to survive. So it's generally best to wait until there's absolutely no chance of frost before you go out there and start hacking away at things that look like they got melted.
good point.
Good point, yeah.
Anybody else have any questions? Feel free to raise your hand or speak up, unmute.
Question, probably Mike can answer maybe. When you're gardening and say, instead of using a garden bed and you're using large pots, do you still use the same ratio 50-50 of compost and topsoil? Or is that compost going to be too concentrated and heavy for a plants in a pot?
Yeah, generally, if it's really in a pot, I think potting soil is probably appropriate and probably works better. We don't
Okay.
recommend using potting soil in a raised bed for a couple of reasons. It doesn't seem to work very well, and it's extremely expensive to, you know, do a large raised bed. But for a pot, you know, potting soil presumably formulated for what you're growing. So there are high acid potting soils you maybe put in if you're growing citrus, or I don't know, there's probably a couple of others.
Gardenias,
The
yeah,
what?
gardenias, azaleas, those all are.
Yeah, for plants that want high acid kind of soils, then that's certainly an option. But yeah, I don't, does that answer it? Okay.
Were you asking about annual plants or perennials?
Mostly perennials, and a tree I have, it's a loquat tree. It's probably about 6 or 7 years old. It's in a big pot.
Mhm.
Just remember, you're gonna probably have less of activity in the soil. You're gonna need to re-fertilize or add, you know, new organic matter
Mhm.
on a fairly regular basis to get the nutrients back in there.
Okay.
Mhm.
I have a
Thank you.
question.
Yes, Joan.
So this Sunday I have pegged for working in my garden, and before I start thinking about what flowers I want to plant, I want to boost my soil with compost. When I go to the garden store to look for a bag of compost, is there anything that makes one bag different from the other, or just go with anything? And then what's the best way to get it into the soil? Like, how deep should I mix it in?
Who wants to answer that?
And also, how do I do that without disturbing the flowers that are already in the ground? Three questions.
Anybody want to tackle that?
Well, I can add a little bit, and then please, Mike and everybody else jump in. I think that, so when I'm looking for compost, if I have to purchase it, I want organic compost. And so that's one of the keys that I look for. And I mean, I think that Mike has talked in a lot of the other talks about how we know now that we want to disturb the soil as minimally as we can, so that it's better to just lightly fork in when you're adding compost. If this is an area that is just, I mean, dying for some organic nutrients, then you're probably going to have to dig a little bit more. But I think in general, you're just going to kind of gently rake in an inch to 2 inches before you plant. So Mike, you want to add to that?
No, I think that seems to cover it. And 2 inches is kind of the minimum that's often recommended per year in an area.
I would add one thing, that if you're using manure of any kind, It's good to add it a month in advance because some of that nitrogen has to be converted to usable
yeah.
nitrogen. So putting it on early is a good idea.
Okay, you have a question in chat. Has anyone had luck with the Mexican finger lime? I am considering shoveling it out of the bed and putting it in a pot. Hardly any leaves.
I
No.
I don't know. Other people may have more experience. I don't with that, although I suspect the Mexican finger lime may be pretty frost sensitive.
Yes. It,
This went through, there's a bear's lime that is supposedly, which I have one of, and I covered it,
Yeah.
it seemed to make it, but that seems to be the most frost hardy of the limes, although in the citrus category, they are probably the most frost sensitive of those that we typically grow or would try to grow.
I was
So,
gonna say that limes are pretty frost sensitive. And one of the ways, I don't know why it doesn't have any leaves, if it's a lack of, nutrition, fertilizing, whatever organic stuff that you need to give it to get leaves, or the cold. But one way that we always dealt with the cold, I lived in a very big citrus region for many, many years down in Visalia. And we always put lights in our citrus trees. We did lose citrus. We lost a lime. We never tried growing another lime in that cold climate again, where the winters and the nights can get cold because limes are very sensitive. But you can try putting lights, strings of lights, or one of those lights sometimes some people have that you might hang on your car to shed light when you're working on the engine at night. You can get little portable lights that you can hang the tree that will help keep it warm.
Yeah, make sure they're not
make sure-
LED.
Yeah, make sure they're
Not
not
too
LED
hot.
lights.
Not too hot.
The only other thing I would add to that is my experience with citrus losing massive amounts of leaves is in irregular watering the previous season. They tend to shed all these leaves to try to stay alive by just hanging on to their stems. And so
The good
that may
news
be one
is
thought.
you can bring them back. My daughter did the
Mhm.
same thing, had a pot that didn't get watered, the leaves all fell off, and they protected it all winter long, and it did get new leaves in the spring. They gave a little fertilizer and it
Yeah,
was still alive. So don't
Yeah.
give up on it until you've given it time to relief.
Next
And you
question.
can see that, I was just going to say, you can see that in the summertime as well, following a heat spell. And then an irrigation, you can sometimes see a leaf fall. And so just stay with it. They'll come back.
Next question. How do I add earthworm casings to the soil around plants and trees?
I just rake them in like I do compost.
Yeah, I agree.
Mhm.
And there's a comment, don't forget to water. We haven't had rain in weeks. Make sure to water everything well because the combination of unwatered plants and freezing temperature is an easy sentence.
Sentence.
Good
That's-
point, but
that is
don't
very
do
good
that with your succulents.
Oh,
Succulents,
really?
yeah, you never want to water succulents before a freeze.
Because they're so full of water already, you'll have ice cubes.
No, they'll just explode.
Yeah.
The cells explode. So they do a lot better if it's the only plant that I know of that needs to be a little bit on the dry side going into a freeze.
Yeah, generally speaking, well hydrated plants are more
Right.
resistant to freezing. So that's an interesting distinction.
It's hard
Next-
one to remember.
Next
Yeah.
question. I bought 16, 16, 16 multi-purpose fertilizer. How do I apply it?
There you go, Mike.
I don't know. Well, I mean, the standard answer is, look at the back of the bag and apply in accord with what the back of the bag says. And you may not need, so that means 16% is nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium. And you may not need that much phosphorus and potassium in our soils. So it's probably not going to hurt anything, but any of those nutrients can get to toxic levels also at some point. So you might want to look, we've talked about soil tests, and I still think it's a good idea. So something like a 5-1-1 may be a better choice for our soils generally. Yeah, whatever, I would, apply it in accord with the concentration and the manner that the bag recommends, the manufacturer recommends.
That's it. No more questions yet.
Okay,
You know,
I want to just add one little thing. We have had a lot of citrus questions recently. And so we didn't, at least my class, we didn't get a lot of citrus information. We're hoping to have a citrus speaker coming up. But one of the things that we've gotten lots of questions are the dark brown to black spots on lemons. People are noticing a lot of that. And that is something called citrus blight. And it's endemic in the Sacramento Valley. And it's a bacterial infection. So on the UCIPM, you can go and read about that if that's something that, if you see black spots on your lemons, you can
On
read
the
about
fruit?
it there.
Yeah, it's on the fruit.
What's that?
It's on the fruit,
Yeah,
right?
yeah. I thought I'd bring that up because that is something we've probably had 3 questions about that in the last couple of weeks.
Yeah.
And I noticed a little bit of the same thing on my lemons. And so that's what it is. And you can find more information on it. I don't want to spoil it. I know the answer, but if you want to look it up, if you have that problem on your fruit, it's something called citrus blight, and you can use Bordeaux spray in the fall to prevent it next year.
Yeah, that's a naughty spray.
Is it?
Yeah.
Why does UCIPM recommend it? Is it?
Yeah, okay, I'm not going to go into that direction.
Okay.
But I think that if you have something and you know you have that, then you have to do something about it if you want to get rid of it. So,
Yeah.
so I spoke out of turn, I think, a bit.
Okay.
But it's
I'm sorry to put you on the spot. Okay, any other questions? Because otherwise we're getting close to 4 o'clock.
I have a
Well,
quick one.
okay.
Yes.
When
Sure.
it comes back to freezing temperatures like we're going to get in the next few days, what about watering your lawn? Is that something you like hold off on, or is there a certain time to water it, or should you just?
Anybody have a lawn? I don't have a lawn, so I can't answer. I don't know what the answer
Mine's
is.
Bermuda and it's sound asleep. So, you know,
Mike
I
or
don't
Bart,
know.
do you know the
I
answer
mean,
to that?
I don't know. I
Well,
don't think lawns freeze very easily.
grass is very, very resistant to freezing
Yeah.
temperatures.
Oh,
I don't think
okay.
anything we get here, and even if it were, you basically, kill the top, the leaves or the roots are
roots,
still going to come back.
yeah.
I mean, people have lawns in Minnesota,
Right.
Yeah,
so
that's true.
that's probably not a problem. I have a couple of questions I'm just going to toss out there. One is, do you think it would be a good idea to do this quarterly? And I don't think Joy is committed to that yet, but we have tossed it around. So whether or not you think that's a good idea may influence.
You mean a panel?
Do this,
Yeah,
a panel
a
like this. probably
seasonal garden related panel.
Yes, yeah, and focus probably on questions that the help desk has been getting, at that time or something like that. And then the other one is, would it make sense if we did this like the second and fourth Thursday instead of every other Thursday, which isn't going to make a lot of difference, but it would probably make it a little easier for us to advertise. So,
Oh, you mean, right, oh, yeah, because there's some
Yeah.
months that have
Yeah, I mean-
5 Thursdays, yeah.
right, or yes, or 3 or whatever. So you could probably, you don't have to answer those necessarily right now. You could send Joy an email, and I just put my email for those who.
And yeah, to wrap up, if you do come up with gardening questions, be sure to visit the Yolo Master Gardener website, because it tells you where to call, or preferably where to email, and the kind of information to send us if you have a garden question. You can also go to the farmers markets when they start up again, and you can also go to the West Sacramento Lowe's on certain days, and they have master gardeners there to answer questions.
Joy,
Yes,
this is Merle from the Master Gardeners table down at the farmer's market. We are open for business.
in the Davis.
The Davis
Yeah,
Farmers
we
Market.
have been for a couple of weeks now.
Okay.
Yeah.
And Woodland will be opening a little later.
May.
Yeah.
till May.
But please come and see the wonderful master gardeners who man all these different spots, or email the help desk or phone.
I think you had one more question.
Okay.
Okay,
And
if you just saw
Yusa?
one thing.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yusa?
Yeah, I was asking a question that I did not water my plants earlier before this freeze came. So, and I covered them for last 2 nights. I have been covering them, whatever I can cover. Do I water them now or just wait until this frost is gone?
I water.
Right.
Yeah, you can water and cover. Do both.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Do it. Yeah, it's certainly not, other than the succulents, as we just heard. It's certainly not going to hurt, and plants take up water pretty quick, so it's probably not too late.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Any other questions? Anybody? Okay, we will be back on March 10th for our presentation on roses by Spring Tens. Okay, bye
All right, well,
everybody.
thanks,
All of
everybody.
you.
Good to see
Thank
you.
you to all the panel people for helping out.
Thank you, everyone.
Yeah,
Bye.
thanks. Bye-bye. Stay warm.